my name is Fumi Ajayi, and I'm the director of K-8 Mathematics for the Niles Township High School District. I work in a program called Curriculum for Classrooms, where I work with our center schools around best practices in mathematics. So today, what we're going to be talking about is strategies for developing critical thinking through the lens of social and emotional learning and STEM education. And this is geared towards K through 5 classrooms. So before we get started, I want you to take a moment and just pause and think, what would you expect to hear and see in a learning environment where there's evidence of social emotional learning that really emphasizes critical thinking? What does that look like? What does that sound like for you? So just take a moment to think about that. Okay, so you have some ideas in your mind. Let's move on. All right. So what we're really focused on is that oral language development. How do we get students to really express their thinking in a variety of ways? Is it going to be through oral dialogue? If it's not oral dialogue, how do we get them to write about their thinking? Um, if they feel comfortable expressing their thinking when it comes to their emotions, they should be able to express their thinking when it comes to any of the content that that you're providing for them. Okay, so we want them to feel as comfortable as possible in our classroom environment, if we're in the classroom or if we're online. And one of the things that I've been hearing a lot from educators is, how do I get students to engage? How do I get them to engage? How do I get them to turn on their screen? How do I get them to communicate with their peers when we're in this learning environment? So today, this is what we're going to really focus on, some strategies for that. All right. So by the end of our session today, there are a couple of things that you should be able to walk away with. Strategies for getting students to identify their emotions, communicating their thinking, and sharing their perspective. When we talk about that STEM related education, we're talking about writing across the curriculum. I know that that's something that people are always looking for. How do we get students to write more? Write about, what they're seeing, what they're observing. And this is where this critical piece comes in, being able to compare what they're observing, okay? And this also helps to stimulate the vocabulary development that we want them to be able to express what they are seeing and having the academic vocabulary to do that, okay? So I'm going to provide some strategies that I've used that have been really successful in developing those skills for students. All right, so this is what I like to start off with, okay? So I'm going to give you an opportunity to start here. How are you doing today? On a scale of 1 to 10, where would you rate yourself? So take a moment. Where are you? Are you somewhere in the middle? Are you super duper happy? This is the same strategy that we want students to be able to do, taking that just few moments at the beginning of class to just gauge, where are our students? We will jump right in and want to get started with the content that we're teaching. And sometimes students are just not there. They're not ready to engage. And so when we can check in with them to see where they are, it gives us some insight into our next steps, okay? So as I stated in the beginning, one of the things I'm hearing from teachers is that, my students won't respond, okay? One of the things that they might be doing is they're waiting for other people to respond. It's all about that peer pressure, okay? So these are some things that you can do using that chat box. Say, okay, when I count to 3, I want everyone to put a number in. How are you feeling today? So that everyone's putting that number in at the same time. They're not seeing what their other peers are saying, seeing in advance. We just put it in. Get it out the way, okay? Using emojis. Now, I also know that one of the strategies that has been really successful for teachers is students sometimes feel a little bit more comfortable doing that private chat to the teacher. And I know. If you have 30 kids in front of you, there is no way that you can respond to every single child's needs. But using just something really simple where you can kind of quickly glance and see what's happening with the students is very effective. So whether it's that emoji, whether it's that, thumbs up, physical thumbs up, or the thumbs up that you may be using with your Zoom or something like that, really will help create that responsive interaction from students. Okay. So let's get started into looking at some strategies for actually delivering some lessons. What I'm going to have you do is walk through a series of photos that I would present to students, and then we'll have a discussion about it after you've looked at it. Okay, so just take a moment. Okay, you're that student, write in your notebook, what do you notice about this photo? Three things. What are three things that you notice about this photo? Okay, you got your three things? Okay, let's move on to the next one. Okay, now let's take a look at this photo. Three things again. What are three things that you notice about this photo? Okay, so as we move on to this next one, let's compare. So you would have had to have written down three things about the first photo and three things about the second photo. So now let's look across and see what you have. Okay. So when you're thinking about working with your students, where are there some opportunities for you to engage in dialogue around what they're seeing? Okay, because this is something that's non-threatening. You're not jumping right into the content. It's literally just an observation, and you're scaffolding that observation for them. Okay, so what do you notice in this first photo? Just take a quick glance. There's no wrong or right answers here because it's literally, what do you notice? Okay, so then you move on to that second photo. What do you notice here? Okay, so when you're thinking about that, what types of questions will you need to um, have in your toolkit to respond, as students are working? Okay, so these are some questions to ask yourself. How will students submit their responses? Again, depending on the grade level that you have, that may vary. If we're talking about the younger students, this may be an oral, okay, let me just kind of share out what I have. If we're talking about students that are a little bit older, this is something that you may want to have them put in a chat. This is something that you may want to have like maybe a Jamboard projected or something like that. Okay. Now, this is also something that can be done in a breakout group. I often hear, okay, sometimes students go out into the breakout group, but they're not all sharing their dialogue. So one of the things to think about for yourself is, how can you get students engaged and sharing their information within that group? What protocols need to be put in place? Okay. All right. How much time should you dedicate for a guided discussion? That's always a really great question to ask yourself, because sometimes the conversations could get so far down a rabbit hole that you've kind of lost the context of the content that you need to teach. So my recommendation is no more than about 5 minutes is a great launch to any lesson. Okay, so let's look back at these two photos that we just looked at now. How could you take these same two photos and launch a lesson on coordinate planes? Okay, let me give you a moment to kind of think about that. So let's say you're teaching fifth grade and you want to launch a lesson on coordinate planes. How can you take these photos and utilize them? Okay, you got some ideas down? All right. So I'm just kind of thinking out loud, looking at the photos. One of the things that I may think about is, okay, so these two particular photos are pictures of Chicago. What do you know about a Chicago grid? Chicago grid system starts downtown and then it radiates out. This is information that a student may not necessarily know. So that you can build a whole lesson just around number one, the history of how the grid system was built up, why a grid system exists, how far it goes, where it starts, where it ends, and then bring out that graphing paper. And now let's sit down and graph this out. Okay, if we're talking about coordinate planes, we're starting at that 0 point and radiating out. There's so many different concepts and ideas that you can take just from using something really, really simple and engaging for students. You see how just, again, looking at a photo can launch a conversation. Okay. So now, when we're talking about writing is something that we're always trying to figure out how to improve students' writing. Okay. One of the strategies that I like to do is working from STEM content, descriptive writing, describing what you see, describing what you observe, building that out over time. I had one activity that I did with some students where we were looking at beans. Okay. We were literally dissecting a bean, looking at it from the inside, taking the coat off. So from boiling it and observing what it looked like as, after it had been soaked for a while, to peeling the coat off, describing what that looked like, developing the vocabulary for what that is, opening it up, looking at in on the inside, looking at the parts of the leaf that are actually inside, the embryo that is inside. All of that taken into consideration, we literally just started writing down what we observed. And next thing you know, you have a whole paragraph of descriptive writing. Okay. And it's descriptive writing in the context. Anything that you can think of that gives students an opportunity to take everyday objects around their space and develop a deeper understanding of the material that you are presenting to them, the better. Okay. So, what I want you to pay attention to are the next couple of slides that I'm going to present to you, and just kind of take note of how this concept can be scaffolded. All right. Okay. So now this was designed for the K2 range, but just notice how it scaffolds together. So first I start with a think aloud. I'm engaging students in my own observations. Okay. I'm starting with that I notice, I notice, I notice. So anything that I can pick out, I'm sharing with them and I'm making it extremely simple. Okay, now I'm giving them an opportunity. This is the I do, we do. Now it's your turn. So, second thing that I like to do in vocabulary development, I will give students multiple ways of saying the same thing. So, this overarching thing that we're talking about is making observations. Okay. So, I may say, I notice or I see. And I will let them know it means the exact same thing and I'm using it in context. Okay. So, here in the beginning, I said, I notice. So now I want them to say what they see. And I'm using those words interchangeably. Okay. And in this instance, I'm having them say it out loud. I can also have them write it. Okay. So now this is where we start that comparative observation. And I'm again using it in the context. Okay. Compare means to look at something closely, right? And we're looking at more than one thing closely. So I'm showing them my thinking. I'm using the language in the context, and I'm showing them what it means to compare. And throughout my lessons, I love to use comparisons because it draws you closer into the content that you're working on. It's just like when we do a close read, it's no different than that. A close read is you're looking closely at the text that you are engaged in. And now let's compare it to something else that we're reading. Same concepts are used in math, same concepts are used in science. Okay. That's basically what science is. It's comparative. You're observing something against something else. What do we already know? This is something we haven't seen before. What do we already have information about? And how can we compare the information that we already have to this new thing that we're looking at? Okay. All right. So now it's the student's turn. Again, I'm using this language interchangeably. Before I said I see, now I'm saying I notice. Okay. All right. So, when we're talking about making these connections, being able to write across the curriculum, where in the last couple of slides that I presented you, were students writing? Where were there opportunities for students to write? Even if they're talking, saying it out loud, where's there an opportunity for them to step back and write it? How could you change that to a writing strategy or skill that they're learning? Okay. Where were there opportunities for students to develop the skill of making observations? Not just observations, but being able to compare one thing to something else. Okay. So I want you to take a step now and just think in lessons that you're currently teaching, where are there opportunities for you to build in the same type of techniques? So just take, I'll say, 3 minutes to jot down some things. Okay, just finish up your thoughts. All right. So, the purpose of us scaffolding the information this way for students is really because we want them to be able to develop the confidence to share their thinking, to share how they're seeing things. Okay. So, as you're thinking about creating lessons like this, put that lens on. What opportunities are you creating for students to share in confidence how they're feeling, how they're seeing the information? Because you don't know where they may be struggling unless you are doing these type of informal observations for yourself. This is how you're collecting information about your students. You can gather so much information about their strengths and also their weaknesses, and just kind of looking at things from this perspective. Okay. So, next, what we're going to do is explore opportunities for the inquiry based instruction. So, everything that we've been doing up to this point has been inquiry based, but now let's get a little bit of the hands on involved as well. Okay. And the purpose of that is to develop a deeper vocabulary for the students that's embedded. Okay. After we've done that, let's have a little bit of a dialogue about what you noticed. Okay. So just take a moment and look and notice. Okay. So prior to this slide, we may have introduced the concept of symmetry and asymmetry. Okay. So now we're getting students to do an informal assessment for themselves. Okay. And this is again from an approach that's very friendly and non threatening. So after I've given them an opportunity to make their informal assessment, then I provide them with some more information. Again, we're looking from this perspective of observation. So all they're doing is just looking at a shape. What do they notice? What do they see? All right. Now, I really like this activity because, again, it's taking something very simple that's out in the environment. Soon, here in Chicago, it'll be wintertime, so the leaves won't be as accessible as they are now. But what else can students use that's in their environment to do activities where they can just go grab something and develop vocabulary around it? So, in this particular one, we're looking at leaves, we're folding leaves, and they're able to assess for themselves what they're seeing, what they're noticing. Now, I also like to give them that opportunity to take things a step further. So, let's say all I want to focus on is asymmetrical and symmetrical in just my launch activity. What else can they do after the lesson that doesn't feel necessarily like homework? Okay. So I may think about, okay, for this particular activity, they're going to continue to look at what symmetry means. So, hey, here's a little bit of an art activity. Kids love to draw anyway. So let's provide them more opportunities to do that. Okay. Oh, wait, hold on. Not to the end yet. So, what I want you to kind of step back right now and say for yourself, how can you take, again, the structures that you have currently in your own classroom and flip them around so that they are inquiry based? Now, One of the things that I want you to notice is I provided them with some sort of visual stimulus first, and then we engage in what the vocabulary is. And the reason we do that is because it provides students an opportunity to anchor the vocabulary that they've been introduced to a tangible experience. Okay, so what can you do in your practice to create those types of experiences for students? What would be next for you? Okay, so our takeaways from today: we want students to have opportunities to express themselves, giving them multiple lanes and opportunities to do that, creating dialogue in a way that feels non-threatening. So when a student is comfortable in the environment, they are more likely to engage in conversation, okay? More likely to produce better outcomes. And the reason they're able to produce better outcomes is because you've created this platform where it doesn't matter if the answer is correct or not correct. They're merely sharing their experience, merely sharing their thinking. And so that provides an opportunity for you to make any corrections that need to be made over time. Okay. So students are more likely to come to you when they need help. And then you're also creating strategies and structures for where students can engage in dialogue with their peers as well. Okay. So I want you to kind of take away, what are some next steps for you? Within your own practice, within your department, within your school, how can you take these simple things and bump them up? Okay. So I'd like to thank you for your time today. If you'd like more information about what we have to offer, please feel free to shoot us an email. Thank you.